Jura has unlimited Togedama, or more precisely, Jura ignores Togedama, Ryu, and Matsuri for a reason. Let's talk for a moment about Jura and the last few chapters, where the most interesting part is undoubtedly Mamushi's ability to split himself without limits. Starting from a topic of discussion that I think cannot be explained in detail yet, or more precisely, has been left hanging by the author. After a battle in the Land of Wind, there are certainly many questions, such as scenes that have fans theorizing. It starts with Jura's gaze at Sarada, which has been quite intriguing so far. Yeah, you know what I mean? After Sarada successfully destroyed Ryu and fell unconscious, Jura appeared from hiding through Tsumeka after Boruto, who was the trigger, had also destroyed Matsuri into pieces. At that point, for some reason, Jura's gaze was not as usual. His expression was as if there was something that so far could not be explained, because it's impossible that this expression was just a coincidence, right? However, it seems that behind that expression there is something much more interesting. Yes, Jura seemed to ignore Ryu and Matsuri's Togedama and prioritized chasing Boruto. So far, I think Mamushi is the answer to our curiosity. Yeah, you heard right. First and foremost, this topic will focus on Togedama, also known as Thorn Soul Bulb. That means, since Mamushi's abilities and powers were revealed, I think in the previous video you already saw the results of the vote between several Divine Tree humans. Before the video was published, the results showed that the majority chose Mamushi. Even some of your responses agreed that Mamushi showed that he still held the top position after Jura as the strongest Shinju. And again, the majority chose him after his abilities and powers were revealed. But after thinking about it, at least for now, because in truth, only time will reveal who is truly the strongest after Jura. Meaning, Hidari just needs to adapt and understand many things first before he can fully show his real potential. In fact, in his very first battle, he only appeared like an innocent Shinju who didn't understand much. And the deeper he comes to understand himself, the more his true strength and abilities will gradually emerge. And sure enough, a few days after I held a vote on my community channel, the final result showed a shift where the majority chose Hidari. As for Mamushi and this discussion topic, after thinking about it, there is something that makes us curious and suspect that this will not go according to Koji's plan. After we read Kashin Koji's explanation on how to deal with Mamushi's ability to split himself with no limit, Koji's explanation actually sounds fairly easy in theory, right? However, if we think about it more deeply, Mamushi's abilities and power are far more terrifying than what Kashin Koji described. In other words, the one sentence that became the exciting topic is the original body. We know, among all the Divine Tree humans, Mamushi is the only one shown to be able to split into multiple original bodies. Regardless of a theory that deals with its strength and abilities, that sounds simple. But if we think more deeply, this ability could be the key to creating unlimited power. We know that Mamushi cannot split himself after his eyes are destroyed, right? And imagine if every time Mamushi could no longer split himself, he could be absorbed back in, like a self-made chakra fruit. This means there's a pretty crazy process that's repeated if they find themselves in a situation where they can't face shinobi with potential far above Mamushi's. In other words, by repeatedly splitting and absorbing, this instantly increases its power exponentially. And this is the craziest part. What if all the other Shinju, including Mamushi and Hidari, are ultimately just sacrificial pieces? Not just an army, but fuel for one grand purpose. Let's say to make Jura evolve into a more perfect form. Because you shouldn't forget that the Ten Tails is an unlimited source of chakra, right? And that also means it could be the reason why Jura seems indifferent to other Shinju like Matsuri and Ryu when their Togedama are exposed. Instead of choosing to seize the Togedama, Jura immediately targeted Boruto. Because, harshly speaking, they are merely evolutionary material that will eventually be absorbed or devoured by Jura himself. If this theory is correct, the Mamushi division cycle is merely the initial stage. The more Shinju entities that emerge, the more energy that can be absorbed, and the closer Jura gets to his ultimate form as the Divine Tree human. In other words, they were all created for one reason: to help Jura achieve godhood. And if that happens, the battle against Jura may no longer be merely a war against Shinju, but preventing the birth of the Ten Tails with nearly limitless chakra. And even though we know that in form there is a similarity between the chakra fruit and the Thorn Soul Bulb, The fact is that the object has a similarity. Togedama is an object or fruit that is basically a collection of genetic information, chakra and the like from the manifestation of shinobi in the form of a thorn soul. Meanwhile, the chakra fruit has a capacity that is clearly very different. The scale is indeed irrelevant because it is the result of absorbing all the genetic information and chakra on a planet. But again, fundamentally, the scale difference between the two is quite massive. However, both are sources of energy and chakra that, if consumed by relevant entities, or more precisely the Shinju itself like Jura, could very well result in a significant increase in their power. Is that correct? Now, on the other hand, still in the same context, we also know that every part of the Divine Tree's body has Togedama. This means, does the more Mamushi that are created or divided naturally mean the same as the number of Togedama? Logically, every Mamushi body that is divided will produce a natural body. This also means that they should still have Togedama as their natural manifestation. And as a final conclusion, first, it is certain and reasonable that the invasion of Mamushi, which we know is a theory explained by Kashin Koji to deal with his abilities, will not be as simple as Koji says. There will be many plot twists that we have never even thought of before. Second, whether it is true or not in theory, does it make sense that the more Mamushis divide themselves, the more Togedama are created? Because, once again, this is all based on logic to understand the meaning of the original body itself. Because if the context is the original body, then it is very unlikely that there will be anything different between each of these bodies. Third, for some reason, Jura seems to have a reason to ignore Togedama Matsuri and Ryu. And one of the reasons is in the conclusion in number 2. Apart from the fact that it leads to a final result such as absorption to help Jura achieve the final level of evolution, do you believe that if Jura absorbs or eats other Shinju in the form of Togedama, it will significantly increase his power? Honestly, I believe and am confident about this. Because in truth, Jura is the apex predator for now. Even though Jura isn't doing that right now, it's still possible that he'll end up doing the same thing as momoshiki. Because, in truth, Mamushi and Hidari still have quite significant roles in helping Jura by giving him advice or simply exchanging ideas about things that Jura himself doesn't understand, especially since the Divine Tree humans are still in the phase of understanding and thirsting for knowledge at this point. Oh yeah, shout out to Diablo for coming up with this pretty interesting theory. But if you guys have any other interesting theories to discuss, let me know in the comments, and please don't forget to use the hashtag #AskNim. So yeah, if you guys have any theories or anything else interesting to say about this case, I'd love to hear it. Thank you for watching. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the next video. Bye-bye. Dada bio.